Good afternoon all. My name is Joonas Nikkanen. I work at CSC, leading the group on research information. So what we do here at CSC manage, for example, the research.fi, which is the national quiz. And that's basically also the starting point for our case study within FAIRcall for IOSC. So it has a long name, but basically we have to do with quiz systems more or less in the European landscape. These quiz systems, I know you are familiar with these to some extent. They come in many forms, be it organizational, regional, national. There are plenty of them. But what they usually have in common is that they are quite close to the, let's say, the local sources for data in a way that usually researchers themselves or then people in the organizations do curation for that kind of things that are maintained in quiz systems. These might be activities on research, etc. Basically, for the case study that we started within the project, this is somewhat described over there. So these kind of quiz systems that we have, many are really invaluable sources for information, especially for research assessment, policy making, and highlighting, for example, IOSC-related activities or contributions, if there would be interoperability between them that has been somewhat lacking, especially before. In our case study, what then we tried to tackle, just highlighting a few in the upcoming slides. Not all of them. We tried to implement or we're implementing many of the components that have been presented today. But this is just to get an overview on what kind of domain we are talking about. So we have within the case study open air with the RD graph being aggregating this kind of quiz information on European or global level, more or less. Then on the middle, which I'm representing as well, is the research.fi. So we have a national service providers who provide more or less national services in that country or region itself. And then what's, I feel at least, really valuable also is the source systems and local services that are provided. These are, for example, funder systems, local quiz systems. There might be repositories, etc. And these are something that we need to take along in uptaking these kind of components. They really bring the value for making, let's say, global or European components or the IOS components here matter in the long run. So also disseminating information to that end is really important. And this is something that we've tried to do in the case study. So basically taking the idea of the workflows. So what kind of workflows there might be relating the component usage, for example. And then obviously one big part of the case study also was about the idea of exchanging quiz information between systems. So basically moving on the vertical level here. So what could, for example, MSCR provide for this kind of data exchange and how to operationalize it in a meaningful manner. But to highlight a few, so in the three slides, I will be walking through some of the components that we've been trying to make happen in the case study and make use of them to the best extent we could. First is really about RAID. So this is something that we've been discussing today quite a lot, and there is poster session also downstairs on this. So the case study that we've built on research.fi regarding the RAID usage. This is all I guess familiar for you. So the idea that what RAID is and how it would really help with handling this kind of interlinking entities or objects. And that's really the starting point for this. And what we've been trying to do in the case study really is try out, first of all, the RAID, the European registry for that, maintained by SURF. And then, I guess more importantly, and this has been talked with the local organizations, for example, universities, is that how do we actually move forward from, let's say, the technical part of minting raids. So the governance model, how to maintain it so that all of the players in the domain are in it together and make it feasible. Because when we talk about raids, we really talk about things that get quite close to the researchers, and in that the universities need to be abroad as well. And for example, the CRIS systems that they are running. Next is really about the bit graph and the RD graph components, and this is somewhat what we've been trying to do on that end. So looking for ways to actually enrich information on the actual linkage between, for example, a researcher and a data set, and for example, citations on articles and how they move forward. We've been really active on the data side of things, so looking at bit graph and moving forward with making use of that information via the API layer and the data dump that they provide. This might be of use for many stakeholders in this domain, and discussing this with the community. What it means for the researchers really is about making their work more visible. So looking at the collaboration between collaboration around datasets, for example. So that's really important to make it happen, let's say, under the hood between the various systems. And then lastly, briefly on the MSCR side, this has been discussed further today already, for example, by my colleague Jonas. For the CRIS community, what this means and what we try to do really is achieve some kind of crosswalks for the data exchange purposes. So this means between OpenAir, for example, but also between the CRIS systems, be they local or national. In this MSCR usage, we've been also looking at the serif standard, which is something that's maintained by the EuroCRIS Association currently, and has been somewhat a standard for this kind of conceptual level of handling CRIS-like information. And that's one part of this, and we are looking ways to make it happen in the MSCR component. But I guess that sums up our case study more or less, and also in time. So thank you.